Hello, my name is Yegor Bublik, and I'm the project manager associated with the Terminal E modernization project here at Logan Airport, located in Boston, Massachusetts. My following assistant project managers are.
How's it going? My name's Andrew Wheeler. I'm one of the assistant project managers on the Terminal E modernization project, and the rest will introduce themselves as well.
How's it going? I'm James White. I'm also an assistant project manager, and I'll be helping out with the risk analysis today.
How you guys doing? My name's Kyle Wood. I'm an assistant project manager as well. And here's my next coworker.
Hey everyone, I'm Miles Wren, and I'm an assistant project manager as well.
Hey guys, it's Bara. I'm assistant project manager for modernization of Terminal E of Boston Logan Airport.
So a little bit about this project. We were able to interview Greg Ettrich, who is an architect at Massport. He was able to give us some figures and insight into the job. So the goal of the job is to modernize Terminal E at Logan Airport. As of right now, it is quite outdated, so by the end of the project, it'll be modernized. There are going to be 4 new gates added, including 3 that have been approved to be built all the way back in 1995, but never were. So 25 years later, they're finally going to go up. These improvements will, from onto Terminal E, will create a sound barrier to East Boston neighborhoods that are close by. By creating these sound barriers, it'll help the surrounding communities not have as much noise.
So we first looked at our 9 major risks associated with the project, and the 9 major risks were noise control, safety and OSHA security, insurance and bonding, escalation, labor strikes, weather, underground utility obstructions, crane operation, and roof and window glare. And we took those, you can go to the next slide for me. We took those 9 major risks, and we took 2 methods to perform a risk analysis. First, we did a qualitative risk analysis utilizing the risk assessment matrix provided by Professor Fernando Romero. And we looked at the impact for each risk and the probability. And when you associate an impact to that risk and you associate a probability to that risk, you multiply it and you get your value for your rating. And you go to the next slide for me. After we did that for each risk, we categorized them into 3 major groups: a low risk, a moderate risk, and a high risk. Here we are, we have listed them 3 categorized, and then we proceeded to do a quantitative risk analysis utilizing decision trees. And Kyle here will go over and explain to you the first risk.
So the first risk we went with was noise control, and we decided to put that as a low risk. Now, when it comes to noise control, we figured the probability of an accident occurring due to noise was about 10%, and the probability of an accident not occurring from noise at about 90%. Now, on one hand, if we were uninsured and an accident does occur, we could be liable for $42,000 worth of damage. On the other hand, if we're insured, we would be covered and we'd only have to pay $2,000 for the insurance. Next slide, please. And here we have a noise control EMV chart. As you can see from the numbers, the top 2 are without insurance, which equals up to $5,100. The bottom 2 are with insurance, which equals up to $2,000. Next slide, please. So we had a couple different avenues we could go with noise control, but we decided we would mitigate the noise. The ways we came up with mitigating this would be by limiting the heavy equipment work. So if we can do a job without using heavy equipment, we are going to do it that way. And if that's not possible, we would like to use a sound or dampening curtain. So we would basically take the heavy machinery or whatever loud work's going on, and we'll put a curtain around it to minimize the noise. So that will create a safe work environment and also not bother the patrons and the staff at the airport. And we figured with the use of mitigation, it would cost $2,000 versus $5,100. So we chose mitigate as it saves us $3,100.
For our next risk, we did job site security and safety. The job site is next to the International Terminal at Logan, which requires security from the state police and TSA, and they would check IDs and worker clearance. And there is also a risk of breaking into the airport and airplanes as well as the job site. So with trespassers, we wanted to look at if someone came in, what would the impacts be if they had an accident or did not have an accident. For the accident, with trespassing on an active construction site, it can lead to an accident, whether it's someone working on it or someone coming into it. If the injury is fatal, then the company will be held responsible. If there is insurance, then the company will not be liable. But if there's no insurance, the accident can lead the company to costs of around 1.2 million. If the injury is non-fatal, then the company can be held responsible if there's no insurance, which can add up to around $12,000. With no accident, if someone trespasses into the job site and needs to be taken away, there can be an impact of around $35,000 with no insurance. And with insurance, it can be around $700. So this is the EMV chart matrix, which just shows the advantages of insurance rather than not insuring. Next slide. So our solutions were to transfer the risk to the responsibility of the state police and the TSA, who would run ID checks, and the airport would be responsible for funding security. And if any extra security is needed, it could affect the schedule and overall cost of the project. So the transfer cost to transfer to the police is around $6,000. And as you can see, that is a lot less money than if you decided not to transfer, which could afford you up to $1.2 million.
So for the third low risk, it's insurance and bonding. We have in the case of occurring accident, it's the cost is $500,000, and in the case of not occurring is zero cost. So if the incident occurs with probability 10%, the outcome would be $500,000. With probability 90% not occurring, it's going to be zero. With the accident probability of 10%, we have workers' compensation. The impact will be $2 million. Comprehensive liability with $4 million, and building damages with around $20 million. We have, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay. So this chart shows the insured accident with probability of 10%. The impact in US dollar is 500,000. The EMV probability impact is about $50,000. Going to uninsured accidents, the EMV impact is about $26 million. And with uninsured, no accidents, the EMV impact is about $90,000. So after that, we have we can say it's necessary to have insurance, and it would be a great idea to save the company a lot of money. And without having insurance, we could end up costing the company a significant amount of money, up to like $7,000.
You're muted, Andrew.
Sorry about that. I was muted. Didn't realize I was. So we, another moderate risk that we determined, this is actually our first moderate risk, is the determination whether to mitigate or to not mitigate escalation of costs on the construction site. And as you can see, the probability of escalation occurring is 10% compared to 90% if it does not occur. So it's much more likely that it does not occur if we decide to mitigate, which is something to keep in mind. And then also, if we do not mitigate, the price standpoint compared to mitigating is $34 million more than if we did mitigate, which is another large factor that we kept in mind as well. And then when using the EMV values, the estimated monetary value, we basically took those probabilities that were in the decision tree, as well as the impact, and then multiply those together to determine the EMV. And with that number, we come up with a decision whether to mitigate or not to mitigate. And we decided to mitigate just because it is so much cheaper than not preparing. So ways that we were thinking about preparing is that we got different agencies to ensure the project will not go over budget, as well as allowing for focus to remain on other parts of the project. And even before that, we got to make sure that the contract is sturdy. There's pre-qualifications, the schedule is solid, and factors in weather and whatnot. Purchasing the right material, make sure we're not overpaying. Materials pre-purchased, that sometimes leads to cheaper materials, and value engineering and alternatives. So we wanted the best value, the best bang for our buck. And if we can mitigate that, we will as much as possible. And that's kind of what we came up with in this risk analysis for escalation.
Okay, looking at the second medium risk, labor strikes, we see that it can actually affect our schedule and cost of the project pretty predominantly. The occurrence is only 5% probability, as it usually doesn't occur that much, but we do have to take into fact that this is a union we are working with, because this is a state project. So if there was a labor strike, it would probably be everyone on the site. And we also have to take into account that this is a high security situation on an airport, so it would be very hard to find new laborers that will come into the site and that we can get checked out and be allowed on the site. As you see, we considered the impact for the low demands, if there was a low demand, if there was a labor strike, and if there was high demands. And then we also looked at if we should keep the standards that we originally have, or should we change the standards and make sure that a labor strike would not occur within our job site. And if we look at the EMV chart, we can see the probability with low demand. The EMV for that is only about 2,500. And then for the high demands, it's around 2,500 as well, because it's only 5% probability. But if we were to change the standards, then it would be around $9,500. But we did believe that changing the standards might be a good thing, even though the EMV does not show this, because it would limit labor strikes on the site as well. And then we just thought about, we wanted to mitigate the risk, as if we mitigated, we will have the workers on site. We'll not have to think about where will we get new workers and find people that will be allowed on the site by the state. And if we were to have a labor strike, we'll not have the manpower to finish this project on time or within budget, which could affect ongoing bids that we have with the state.
So for our last moderate risk, we have weather. Bad weather can lead to postponed dates and higher costs on a project. If the weather is extreme, then preparation and planning is definitely needed, and you may need to bring in equipment to deal with the weather. If work is unable to happen due to snow, cold weather, or heat, then the project may need to halt for a period of time or the duration of the winter if projects can't be done in the cold. If there's extreme heat, then work may need to halt or slow. Some positive risks are good weather can have a positive impact with your schedule. For this decision tree and weather risk, we looked at heat versus wind and rain. For heat, extreme heat can lead to a delay of schedule. A decision to make a contingency plan for delay will let you avoid losses in schedule and project costs. A decision to make no plan could lead to an impact of around $6,000. When working in normal heat, there shouldn't be any impact on your project or your schedule. For wind and rain, extreme storm conditions can cause delays and cancellations. Making a contingency plan for storms where it makes work challenging will let you avoid extra costs and delay with the project. And having no plan in place could leave you exposed to a potential monetary impact of about $30,000. Working in normal storm conditions of light rain and wind shouldn't slow down the project at all or impact it. Next slide. And you can see here the probability of heat and wind and rain is moderately low, but you can see that the costs can add up. So it'd be important to create a contingency plan for the off chance that you run into extreme heat or a large storm. Next slide. So for our solutions, we chose mitigation. We can mitigate the risk of bad weather by creating overtime work days during good weather periods to allow for some cushion in the schedule. And we can decide when we encounter bad weather conditions to bring in equipment like snowplows or fans to help mitigate the risks, or we can make the call to close the site completely until it's safe to work again. If there are certain projects that can't be done in the winter, then it's important to have a schedule that will minimize the risk of these projects going into the colder months. And if that can't be avoided, then it could lead to the project pausing throughout the winter until warmer weather comes in the spring. And the mitigation cost that we added up was around $3,500. And with no mitigation, it would cost you around $37,000.
So for our first high risk we looked at was underground utilities and obstructions. And we thought, because, we must be clear where all existing underground utilities are, either gas lines, electric lines, anything like that, but also running into larger boulders that you could encounter while making our underground utilities. And this being in a city in Boston, we're definitely going to have underground utilities placed in to retrofit with the Terminal E. And so we went about this by looking at underground mapping and hiring a state agency to do this for us. And we saw the probability of this as being around 99% that we would use them. And it would be around 1% of hitting these utilities if we were to underground map. And if we did not do that, and we did this by ourselves, there would be a very high chance of us hitting an already existing utility, which could be a gas line, which could cause an explosion and could be a very large risk factor on the project site, especially considering this is a 4,000 square foot site. So it's pretty large. You can go to the next slide. And then, so as you see here, we took the EMV for each, and hiring the state was definitely the clear decision to go about doing. It definitely limited the chance of us running into any problems and to actually map out correctly where these utilities would go. You can go to the next one. So we decided to mitigate and use a state agency. And as you can see, the cost of mitigation would only be around $40,000, while if we were not to, it would be around $4 million if we were to do it by ourselves and take the risk of actually hitting one of these lines and maybe completely delaying our schedule or even ruining the whole project if we were to go about it that way. You're muted, Andrew.
I know I messed up again. I'm sorry, guys. So for our high risk number 2, we went for crane operation risk, and as well as the airspace, because they coincide. We basically decided either to insure or not to insure the crane, and basically we came up with the numbers to insure based off of factual information. So every crane insurance agency usually charges between 1% and 3% of crane costs, which on average is about $1 million. So it comes out to $20,000 for crane insurance. And if we don't insure, the average crane accident costs around $27,000. And as you can see, accidents are fairly unlikely chance, but they still have 5% chance. And a 95% chance of no accident. And with the outcome of insurance, it stays the same, $20,000. You pay the insurance either way, whether there's an accident or not. And if there is an accident, that's basically whether we're deciding whether it's what the EMV is necessary or not. So basically with this EMV chart, we multiply the probability times the impact, and it comes up with the estimated monetary value. We use that to decide whether to insure or not. So we add the 19,000 and the 1,000 together, as well as the 1850 and the 9,500. And you can see if you add 9,500 and 1850 together, it comes out to be around $12,000 compared to the $20,000 to insure. So comparatively, they are close in price. So it is somewhat up to the project manager to decide, depending on the budget. And there are ways to mitigate. We have the 7460 form. We give locations and heights, FFA regulations of airspace, and the NOTAM basically keeps daily reports, notice to airmen, it reroutes traffic daily, contractor notices, control towers, and the tower tells FFA. So it's dependent on the job site, but for this one, we decided to not insure the cranes just due to the budget.
For our third high risk and our final risk in total, we looked at the roof glare. And specifically, the glare could come from the design of the shape of the roof that we're doing. We're trying to create a wing-like design. And so because of that and the color that we wanted to use, which are a nice red color, we realized it could cause a lot of glare for the pilots. Now, if the pilots can't see, they can't safely land. So, we did a risk analysis on that. And how we broke it down is we looked at whether we want to insure or don't insure. So as shown here, the cost of insurance would be around $2 million. If you don't insure, there's nothing. Now, the probability of an accident happening, a plane crashing, is about 1%, not very likely. The probability of not happening, 99%. On the other hand, if we are insured and an accident happens, either way, we're covered because we're insured. Now, if we're no insurance, we'd have to change the material. And, changing the material would require changing the paint. That would impact at around $300,000 due to the size of the roof. If we don't change materials, that would obviously cost us zero money. But then if we have an accident, you can go to the next slide. After looking at the decision tree and calculating our expected monetary values, multiplying the probability and the impact, we arrived at, you can go to the next one. Next slide. We arrived at our total values for expected monetary value for insurance was $2 million, and for if we didn't insure, it was $220,000. The difference was around $1.8 million. So we realized that it would be a smart decision to insure and to not insure and to avoid the glare completely by changing the plans. What we're going to do is we're going to create a prismatic finish and to the roof, which will allow the color to change from red to orange. The reason we're going to choose is because, the probability of an accident happening is very low. The pilots are trained and qualified, and we felt that the risk coming from a pilot crashing just due to the glare from the roof was low enough where we don't have to insure and we can change the materials and work our way around it. What we will do is continue to monitor this problem, and if any additional problems arises from Massport, then we will respectfully request we will respect their request and prioritize their request over the design building.
Last but not least, we can say that risk management is an ongoing process that continues through the life of a project. It includes process for risk management planning, identification, analysis, monitoring, and control. Many of these processes are updated throughout the project life cycle as new risks can be identified at any time. It's the objective of risk management to decrease the probability and impact of events adverse to the project. Risk is defined as an event that has a probability of occurring and could have either a positive or negative impact to a project should that risk occur.